Alright, on to video 3, starting with the African buffalo today. Now, it's not completely accurate to call this the African buffalo, as there are several subspecies of African buffalo. However, this is quite evidently the Cape buffalo. The Cape buffalo is the largest of the African buffalo and is also, as you can see there, found in the southern and eastern parts of Africa. Certainly more of the savanna rather than the tropical, however, they can still be found in places like Rwanda that is very tropical. Now, for the exhibit, what we're going to do is we're going to actually make a river passing through the center along with some marshland on the back end. Now, this is mostly because the Cape buffalo loves water. They are always found near water. Now, the reason that I'm going to be calling this the Cape buffalo and not the African buffalo is because they're very different appearances and attitudes between the different African buffalo species in Planet Zoo is 100% the Cape buffalo. The other one coming from all across Africa. The other larger one is the forest or red buffalo. The other two are minor subspecies that really aren't too important to discuss. So, why, when they made the African buffalo, did they choose the Cape? Well, quite simply, it is the most iconic and the one that is associated with the African Big Five. Now, the Big Five are essentially the most dangerous animals in Africa for anyone to hunt. On that list, other than the Cape buffalo, are some that you may expect: the African elephant, the lion, the leopard, and the rhinoceros. I don't remember if it was specifically the black rhinoceros or just in general, but these are the ones that are the most difficult and dangerous to hunt. Now, if you noticed in the exhibit, I used the rough terrain tool to help make puddles and ponds to give a more marshland experience. We're going to be using it a lot when we're getting with the semi-aquatic animals. Especially, I do plan to do it quite a bit for the alligator and similar animals. Now, when it comes to the Cape buffalo, it comes by a lot of different names, including two very big side names, or nicknames, I should say. And it really shows the prevalence in its dangerousness in them, and that is quite simply the Black Death and the Widowmaker. If those aren't abundantly clear on how dangerous the animal is, I don't know what to tell you. So, the reason it gets those two names, the Black Death, is obvious. The Cape buffalo is a very dark shade of brown, if not just straight up jet black. And of course, the Widowmaker, well, if you don't like your husband, have him go hunt a Cape buffalo, he's probably not coming home. And not only is this dangerousness given in its nicknames, but it was actually the inspiration for a military tactic used by the Zulu of South Africa. Some of you may know the term Zulu, or may know of their greatest leader, Shaka Zulu, but he created a form of battle known as the buffalo. The way it worked was you had your strongest forces dead center, and that is the head of the buffalo. Coming around the side are the speedy cavalry. However, the Zulus didn't exactly have cavalry, but for semantics, we're going to call them such. They would come in at a pincer maneuver, making the horns of the buffalo. And behind all that would be the reserves, the big force, the majority of the army being the loins of the buffalo. And this was used to great effect not only against other African tribes, but even the colonial oppressors that would come from the Netherlands and England. So, it just goes to show that not only is this animal destructive in its physical form, but in just the cultural significance and the greatness of this animal is truly shown. Now, to add a little bit of scenery, if we are to return to our exhibit, I'm going to take a kopok tree and I'm going to lay it right across the river. Now, that'll have two effects. One, it'll be a more unique way to cut off the area, and two, it will be able to stop animals from going through. So, we have a little bit of creative liberty here, especially with the right types of trees. You can really make it look uprooted without the strange, well, roots. Now, a little bit more facts about the buffalo, and we're going to go back to its name. Now, it is important to note that the term used scientifically for the Cape buffalo has has one word that is no longer, while spelt differently, it's a slur. I'm going to be honest. It is currently used as a slur in South Africa, and it's used twice. Now, I'm going to use this term for no other reason than the scientific name. There's no hate in it. It is merely a scientific fact that this is the name of the animal. And that is Cincerus cafer cafer. As I've said, the doubled word is the non-reputable word. And the name itself, Cincerus, meaning together horned, based on, obviously, the formation of the buffalo's horns, where they come together at the boss, which is the top of the head. And Kafer actually coming from the original name given to the southernmost point of South Africa, a kingdom that used to be there of Kafaria. Pretty much, the Cape Buffalo is the go-to, so they doubled that, meaning that's exactly the one we were talking about to begin with. A lot of animals do this. If we were to also bring up things like the gorilla and the lion, they use the name twice because this is what we meant. There's more, but this is the big one that we were talking about. Now, let's move on to some more interesting information about the buffalo. So, not only is the Cape buffalo more abundant, but it can be up to 2 times as large as the forest or red buffalo found in places like the Congo. But the horns are wider, darker brown or even black, and quite honestly, is a bit more impressive on the size vote of this. Now, being such a massive and influential animal, it is important to note that there's a lot of controversy, may not be the correct word, but its endangered status is kind of up in the air. You see, there was a time where the buffalo was seen completely as a nuisance, but they were strong enough that no one really hunted them greatly. However, in the late 1800s, there was a massive epidemic that led to the deaths of up to 95% of hoofed animals in certain locations in Africa. This wasn't just cattle or buffalo, these were giraffes, gazelles, antelope. So many animals died from this massive pandemic that the buffalo was endangered. It was straight up an extremely endangered species. However, over time, they bounced back, and relatively quick, they even became completely least concern. No one was worried. And it even says that in some places. It may still be so. However, some say it's near threatened because of the poaching, mass hunting, and the fact that it's seen as a pest to, fields and grains. But it's really hard to pinpoint just where they stand on the endangered species list. Now, this, I believe, is going to be the first time I'm going to be using a new method, or a different method, to cover up the less than preferred areas. And by that, I mean the fence. So, obviously I have some of these that are rocks, but we're also going to take some trees, and what we're going to do, once I get the main big ones out, we're going to take them and we're going to sink them into the ground, just like this. And that way it looks more like a bush, and it'll cover up that nasty fence, and the fence being there will stop the animals from escaping. In addition, we are also going to keep adding stone, different types of trees, different types of leaves, to try to make it look more abundant and more unique. As you can see, I am trying to make it a little bit more tropical on this side. However, as I have found out, they aren't a big fan of large foliage coverage, so a lot of this does have to get removed later. We'll speed right through that. Don't worry. Now, the important note that comes across almost every time you try to look up about the Cape buffalo is just how dangerous it is. There's a lot of interesting facts about them, but I want to finish up the information I have about their dangerousness to not only humans, but pretty much any animal who picks a fight. And that is, they are persistent fighters. If you harm one, their biggest goal would be to escape into tall grass, like I'm setting up here, these reeds, and lure you in so that you don't see them, in which case they will come around and blindside you. They also travel in herds, anywhere from only about a dozen to quite literally hundreds. And that's not an all-the-time thing, but they have no problem being in massive herds, and they will defend one another viciously. And essentially, they won't stop until they think you're no longer a threat. That means they have to continuously run you over. Well, that's what they're going to do. Now, speaking of these massive herds, there's another interesting point to bring up. Their social abilities. You see, the buffalo don't really have too much of a hierarchy. They're mostly male-led, but not quite. So, they actually have a voting system as to what they want to do and where they wish to go. Before I get into how that works, let's discuss what I'm doing here. I'm actually filling in the water with what is known as the hard dirt, or hard soil, or at least that's what I call it. Essentially, there's coarse soil and coarse sand, fine soil, fine sand. And pretty much I like to differentiate the two. Coarse means it's in the water, fine means it's dry. So, at a riverbank, I'll use the coarse soil. Or, if I'm making a beach, the coarse sand. And as you can see, I'm putting the fine soil right there in the bedding area. And then I also added some stones to the bottom of that river to make a walking path. While they do enjoy swimming, you know, sometimes you just don't want to. You want to make it across so that they can lie down. I'm going to add this extra tree just so I can make a bit of canopy coverage over the grass. I think that looks nice. What do you think? I think it's nice. So, the voting system of the African buffalo, it's very simple, actually. They will, one of them, one of the dominant females or males, will stand up, point in a direction that it wants the herd to go, and then the others will either follow suit or give their own opinion. And whichever is decided to be the direction they're going to go, so be it. Now, it is also important to note, as one of the big five, they also can be seen picking fights with other animals. including others of the Big Five. Lions are a little bit hesitant on hunting buffalo because they know how dangerous they are, so they'll usually only go after individuals, knowing that if they were to go after the large herd, they're not coming out of it well. But they're very bold animals. They are willing to pick fights with rhinos and elephants as well. It's been documented and seen by professionals that that's something that they're willing to do. And quite honestly, they have the confidence to back it up. And sometimes that's really all you need. You don't actually have to be the biggest or strongest, you just have to have the confidence that you are, and sometimes that just takes you where you need to be. So, with all that being said, I feel like I've harked on just how big and mean these things are quite long enough. What is their importance to Africa? Well, I've already spoken about the Zulu, but as the most abundant and the largest of the bovine in Africa, while they couldn't be tamed, their hides were extremely valuable long before we even realized. Now, many people think that hides are only used for clothing and whatnot, but the thickness and the strength of the hides of the buffalo were used in shields for many African nations, not just the Zulu, but many of the eastern and southern tribes. So if we were to get back to the exhibit, I'm going to add top parts of waterfalls to give a babbling brook appearance to anything jutting out of the water. Now you could also add some of the midsections so that looks like it's running over the water or over the stones. I didn't think about that, but you absolutely could if you would like to make a river in your exhibit. Or even just as a decoration, let's be honest. So, how else are they influential? Well, to be honest, they're one of the biggest forms of food for any still nomadic peoples that live in southeastern Africa. While it is dangerous, a meal like that is unparalleled. It could feed an entire tribe for quite a few days, and it's been seen to do so. There were plenty of different tribes who had it be almost like a rite of passage to hunt the buffalo. And it still continues to this day. While it's not something that is done as often, solely because, well, the buffalo is not only dangerous, but somewhat protected despite its, conservation status. But let's get back into that momentarily. What I'm doing right now is I'm adding a different form of watercolor, and unfortunately we passed it. It came a little too quick, and I felt Amazon works the best when it comes to the color. And to save time, we're gonna skip up a bit, have them bring them in so we can see. Now this is where I realized I made a big mistake. I had way too much plant life, so I sped this up to 4 times speed, and it's not nearly fast enough. Look at this. I have to remove almost everything. The tropical area, not tropical, and sometimes you come across these issues. Now, it is important to note, as you just saw there, you can, in times, replace trees with scratching posts that look like trees. There's 2 different ones in the main game, and there are some that you can download in the blueprints and in the workshop. Now, other than that, I believe I've gone over everything that you need to know about the Cape Buffalo, and I hope you enjoyed the video. There's not going to be any extra video to this of the animal walking around, because look at it, we're already almost at 20 minutes. None of us want that. So, finishing up my little touches, removing the plant life I still need to, and of course, once it's set and done, I'm just gonna add one little tree right here, one fig tree. We're just gonna lean it over so it has a little bit more aesthetic to it. All right. So now that that's said and done, I hope you have a good one. Enjoy your day and enjoy nature. Bye bye.